I have a show apparently that I just found out 15 seconds ago. I have my own show. It's called The Process. Deadline's The Process.
I've been waiting for your show though. This is the natural outcome of your career. This is where it's going to go to, like a late night show host.
What I do is I bring guests on and then I talk the whole time. So good luck. Good luck. We are here with Deadline's The Process. I am honored to interview my buddy and great friend, Greig Fraser, for mostly about the movie Dune. You were just in Poland and you received an award in Poland, true?
Correct, yes. Received a bronze frog for Dune, and Denis was awarded the director award.
And along with that, we had a really nice Q&A with a book that Tanya Lapointe helped us create, at least, or at least instigated. And that was a book of your photographs and my writing that was part of a box set and hopefully will be a limited edition by itself sometime in the future, that seems to be doing well and that we're very proud of. So I think that that's a good way to start out with the first question of you being a cinematographer who is, forget hitting your stride. You know, a lot of people say hitting your stride, but with people who I find are very good / masterful at their given skill, you seem to be hitting a peak right now. I don't know what type of peak, but it is a peak. And given that you are hitting that stride, how did that stride begin? What was the first interest in light, in cinematography, in film, in taking photographs?
You know, it probably started in high school, but the funny thing is, just going back a step, hitting a peak implies that the next thing I do is going to be down the other side of the mountain, right? So that's probably, yeah, all right. Well, cool. So in high school,
this is it for you.
This is it. This is, I'm done. This is my my end. So
let's call it a beginning.
Okay, this is the beginning of my decline. So when I was at high school, I was sort of a little bit listless. You know, I wasn't very good at science or maths, or pretty good at English actually. To be honest with you, I was pretty good at English. But I'd found my stride where I started to learn photography. You know, it was something I couldn't draw, but I could take photos, and it was something that I was very, very sort of passionate about. So I studied photography, got into a photography college in Melbourne, which was one of the better ones, I believe, and proceeded to kind of behave like an older teenager. I failed the first year. I didn't go to school. I slept in. I went to too much partying, and failed effectively. So long story short, I got back in. They let me in, and I continued. And I realized at that point in time that photography wasn't my thing. Photography is a very singular process, and I've discovered that I tend to work best in a group. You know, I work best kind of riffing off other people, seeing other people's reactions, feeling what they're feeling. You know, like sort of like a flock of birds that kind of fly in unison. I found that was kind of the area that I was the most interested in. And so when I discovered filmmaking, I discovered that I could use the same skills I learned in photography school as a cinematographer, but then I got to work with other really talented people. You know, like one of the first things that I ever saw was a director working with an actor. And it was something that was quite foreign to me because I hadn't really ever done drama school or, but it amazed me. And it amazed me that the cinematographer, through their lighting, could totally change the course of a scene or a shot, depending on where that light goes. And it's still something that's, it's like, I still don't quite understand how it works. It's like some magic where you move a light into a certain position and it feels a certain way, but you can have it 3 centimeters off and it changes the tone and feel completely. So it still is quite amazing to me. The art of lighting is still something that I'm sort of working at, trying to perfect and trying to get really good.
And when you said you failed at still shots, what was it about that you felt that you failed? It was, I understand it's not a collaborative process per se, but what was it about it that you felt was it a limitation for you? Was it that you wanted to go?
I think I failed as a photographer because I actually just didn't have a love for stills. It wasn't my first love. I don't love, you know, putting all of my energy into one single image and then holding that image up as a representation of what I am, or that's just not me. I was more of the, you know, shoot the best that I can, 30, 60 frames a day, shots a day, not frames, shots a day, and then let somebody else edit them and decide which one of my shots is the most relevant to the end product. So it's an amazing process, cinematography. The process of friendship and camaraderie, and you know, the 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2 thing. You know, like and also being inspired by some of those great films, of which I can say you've been in. So, like, you know, I'm not sort of floating your boat, but like, you know, you've had the chance, haven't you, to work with some of the most amazing cinematographers ever. So, I mean, how did you experience? Because you started young, didn't you?
I started when I was 16, and it was by accident because I got kicked out of my house and I moved into my father's apartment on the couch there, and I was a little bit of an adolescent, you know, I don't know what you call it, a rogue or a rebel or whatever. So I was on a certain road, and I was trying to get my kind of life together at such an early age, you know. So I started doing martial arts, and then I started pursuing this thing called acting, which I had no interest in, but I had a choice of like an elective choice in high school, a place that I didn't go to very much, high school, but it was like underwater basket weaving and like, you know, acting, and I tried it, and I didn't want to because I didn't like what my father did, because my father was an actor too, or is an actor. So it wasn't anything I was interested in, because he had money and then he didn't have money, and just the massive fluctuation I could just never get my head around. But I did that. It was an improv class, and I remember I was the first to be asked to get up on stage and create a character of your choice, and then the teacher will ask you questions and you answer in that character's voice. And it was kind of like the greatest drug I ever took. You know, there was just something so liberating and freeing about it. And you'd hear, you know, these answers, and I was just liberated. Suddenly the fear of being myself and having to come across a certain way was gone, because I had the scapegoat, which was called character. And yeah, it was great. But you know, I've been very lucky to, and I've always been very, very interested, which is one of the reasons why you and I think became close, was I'm always interested technically in what you do, and then creatively how it manifests. And you come across to me as somebody, I mean, you're just very, very grounded. You're not highfalutin. I find that people who are not so good at what they do, there's usually more ego, there's more posturing, there's more, that's in my experience. And with a lot of the cinematographers that I've worked with, I don't find that. I find them, you know, kind of quietly obsessed of what they do. But what's interesting to me to ask you is when you talk about like an emotional position, when you're looking at a director and an actor work on a scene and what they're tonally going for, what they're emotionally going for, is there times that you will you talk to the director, obviously before that, because you're going for a certain look, you're going for a certain palette, you're going for a certain tone, but then you see all that can change between a conversation between an actor and a director. So are there times you'll try and contrast it? Are there times that a lens choice will be based on where you see it emotionally going, which may have been different than what you guys perceived when you were prepping it?
Because very often when you're standing on a set in the morning blocking a scene, the scene as it stands, as you've discussed it with the director, it becomes different. Because I'm assuming, given that you've been living with these pages for months now, just these pages, in the case of an actor, not you, but in the case of an actor, you come on with a perspective that maybe the director hasn't considered, and that the director and I haven't considered when we've been blocking. Because, you know, I'm like, hey, let's push the actor towards the window. That way they're going to look better. It's going to be simpler for turnarounds. But, you know, the actor decides they want to go and stand in a dark corner because that's where the character's at. And, you know, and you know, quite rightly, that's very it's very sort of worth listening to, because there's a logic there that the actor then has. Then it's the director's decision to, push them into a certain direction, or allow their ideas to come to the front, and so it is something that you have to be super responsive of on the day, because it changes like that. It could change like that. And it's been a situation where, I've been on set where, director and I have decided to put an actor in a corner because that's where the light is and that's where they can do something. And then they've wanted to walk around the room, which suddenly turns a 1-page piece of dialogue into a 4-day shoot. So rather than a 1-day shoot. So there are factors there that you have to consider, because the coverage needs to be achieved in the time that you've got. Cinematography is an interesting one, because it's a bit of a science, it's a bit of an art, it's a bit of everything combined, and you've got to have a bit of a technical ability to be able to kind of do this job, right? Because you need to make those decisions. You have to shoot within the specified time for the most part. You have to be able to sort of see the actor, so therefore you have to expose them properly, and they have to be in focus for the most part. So there is a fair bit of science involved in that, but the magic is those little moments where you have the one-on-one with the camera and the actor. And there are times that I like to handhold the camera a lot, and there are scenes throughout my life that I'm very grateful to have experienced firsthand, and as the first person to experience that experience with that actor, I feel very blessed and honored, because effectively it's me deciding where to put the camera. And the difference between a good shot and a great shot could be an inch, because it's all about seeing just into the eye or not seeing into the eye, or like creating a silhouette or getting a little bit of flare into the lens. So yeah, it's a very interesting.
And is that ultimately decided on an instinct of yours? Because I know when I'm shooting pictures, not that I'm a great photographer, but I know when it clicks into this place of feeling right. And that's emotional, spiritual, mental, sight, everything. It just clicks. And I go, that's it. That's the composition, or that's how close I need to be.
I can't define how and when. This is why I'm a terrible teacher. I think I tried to do this thing called a masterclass at ASC, and I felt so sorry for those poor kids that wasted their afternoon. They could have been out, eating burgers. Instead, they were listening to me kind of babble about stuff that really was irrelevant. I've got 2 parents who are in the teaching business. So like, for me to be so bad, I think I'm adopted or something. but it's an instinct thing. And I don't know, but again, I'll ask you the same question. Like, when you walk on set, you've got an idea, you've read pages, in your mind, your gurney is a certain way. Do you then walk on set with someone like Denis and say, Denis, this is what I think? Or do you go, Denis, what do you think of this character? And here's what I'm thinking. How do you approach that? Like, particularly with this film?
I think with Denis, it's a different thing, because, because I trust him. And that's an instinct. And that can change from movie to movie. It could be the same director. Whereas I think with Sicario, I didn't trust him. And,
really?
And I grew to trust him. Yeah, I had turned down Sicario twice, not necessarily because of him, but, as a supporting actor, a lot of times you're brought on with the promise that they're going to grow the role, and a bigger role doesn't necessarily mean a better role, which I think is evidenced with Dune for sure. With Dune, it was a smaller role that actually turns into a bigger role once we do the rest of the book. But it didn't matter, because the story is so powerful. Just lending anything to such a powerful story, given who was involved, is enough for me. But with Sicario, I didn't know Denis. I'd seen Osandi, and I was very impressed by that. But again, that doesn't mean anything. You see a movie that you're impressed by and everybody wants to get on board because that guy is the guy right now. That's not necessarily the case for me. But the more we worked together, and we wrote a lot together, and we just spent a lot of time volleying together, there was a great trust built. So I remember when it was Legendary who said, we would love for you to play Gurney Halleck in Dune, and we'll send you the script. And I think my response was, there's no need to. I don't need to read the script. I know the story. I know there's going to be a level of of creativity that I can't wait to be able to immerse myself in. But I try not to have specific. I mean, I have specific ideas about character, but about blocking and all that, I try to leave it very open. I'm not one of these guys that say my character would do this. It's really, again, based on instinct, and I go there and I listen to, because I appreciate the needs of the entire movie as a whole. And it's like, I know there's a time factor, there's a finance factor, and all that, and I feel that it can all kind of collaborate and work together in a way that can lend to the story emotionally and psychically and all the other stuff. Denis is a special guy, man. He's able to hold, you know, I've always said it mathematically, and I feel the same way about you. It's like you're able to hold this scaffolding that has to be malleable. That's why it's not a complete structure yet. It's just the scaffolding, and in your mind all at once, and yet it's forever changing. And I've always appreciated that. And for some reason, I trust that the scaffolding is not going to fall, which is not my feeling for all cinematographers or directors.
Choose your blade.
I've had quite a day, Gurney. Give us a song instead. That's rude.
Come on.
Oh, man.
The slow blade penetrates the shield.
I guess I'm not in the mood today.
Mood? What's mood to do with it? You fight when the necessity arises, no matter the mood. Now fight!
What inspired you the most?
You know, I loved all those 80s films, you know, the E.T.s and the Goonies. I don't know if you've seen that. It's a pretty good one.
No, I haven't seen it yet.
No, all the Spielberg numbers, you know, the Star Wars, you know, I was kind of that era. So,
me too.
You know, Grease, I love Grease. I mean, I just watched that recently with the kids?
Yeah.
And it is so fun. Like, it's so fun. And it's so, like, I don't know, I remember hearing that Olivia Newton-John got married to somebody other than John Travolta, and I was devastated.
And devastated.
Devastated. I was like, what's happening? Why is she doing that? That's how much
Why is she doing that to me?
That's how much I was convinced they were a couple. That maybe goes to show how young I was as well.
Well, I have to interrupt you for 1 second. You know, when VCRs first came out, we lived way out in the country on a ranch, and we were given 3 movies for this first VCR. It was Saturday Night Fever, Grease, and The Warriors. I mean, if that doesn't have an impact, I don't know what. I think I saw Grease probably 45 times.
Yeah, it's an amazing movie. That's an amazing movie.
It truly is.
Anyway, like, I don't know, the movies like that aren't being made anymore. I sound like a bit of like old man now, but those films aren't being made anymore. You know, I had the usual suspect of inspirational. You know, the David Moores, who's an Australian photographer, the Ansel Adams, the regular sort of photographers that people look at. What I found though, like when I was trying to make this transition in my mind from photography to film, I never saw a film that I kind of directly related my art and craft to, because, you know, I'd watch E.T. or Goonies, and what I was learning photographically was not in those movies. You know, they were different films. They were lit like people were lighting films in the 80s. There was always camera movements. There was always cranes. There was always like movement. And in my brain, I didn't really have movement as a button. There was no button for movement because it was all stills. But I saw a film called Ratcatcher that Lynn Ramsey directed that was incredibly inspirational to me, because, you know, like the cinematography in that was so beautiful and still, and it was still. They were based on still images. Alan Kutcher shot that, and it was beautiful. To me, it was just the most incredible series of still frames. And if you go back and watch that, you'll go, basically it said to me, cinematography should exist this way, as in it's a still image with motion, with movement, and not, okay, well, how are we going to move the camera? How are we going to swing? What's the jib down? And because I saw a lot of film students at the time, they start their movie with a crane down. I'm like, well, why? Like, I didn't understand what the purpose was. They basically went from one B grade image to another B grade image, and hopefully you didn't notice it was a B grade image because you were moving. So Ratcatcher showed me that, you know, if you had a really fantastic image and you then moved, then the power of that is astronomical. Like, it's off the charts. You start with a great image and you move into another great image. And so that kind of then started to get the gray cells ticking to like, okay, well, this is maybe how I make films. A lot of films in the 70s, a lot of 70s films were a lot like that as well. I guess being influenced by a lot of films in the 80s and the 90s, they weren't as much like that. They were a bit more kind of flashy and colorful. Whereas a lot of 70s films, the Pacula films and All the President's Men and the Klute and these films that were just stunningly shot. So
I just watched All the President's Men from when I flew from Austin back to Atlanta. And once I see, you know, you don't see those types of movies on planes. You know, you see the big 80s movies or the big epic movies. But I think that brings up a good point, is that at least for me, the movies of the 70s were much more emotional. They were just more emotional movies. They were grittier movies. There was just something with more character about those movies, in the cinematography, in the writing, in the acting, in the directing. So, you know, and not to jump ahead too far, but what I find, you know, you who have done a lot of bigger type movies, not all, but especially recently with Batman and then Dune and Star Wars and all that. What I found about Dune is it felt, from a cinematic point of view, to be very emotional. There was something very character driven about it, and it's a misused phrase. But I felt the lens choice. I felt the palette. I didn't feel like I felt like I felt when I read Martian Chronicles for the first time as an 8-year-old. I was literally thrown into a world that was more attractive to me than the world I was living in. And that's really fun. It's not just escapist, but it's a type of emotional core that you want to immerse yourself in, and that you want to, you know, it's a playground you definitely want to play in and find out more about. So what is that? Like you say, if you were inspired by movies in the 70s, what were the choices between you and Denis? How were they made? Where did they come more from you than from him? I don't want to take anything away from Denis, but when you talk about lens choice, when you talk about general lighting palette, when you talk about the emotion of the story itself, how does some of that go?
I mean, I think that it all stems back to a brief or a discussion with the director, and it might be 100 discussions with the director, and it might be, you know, a discussion in the car, discussion on the Skype, discussion in the office, like, and it comes down to all of those things that I am trying to burrow into his psyche to get into what he's after. And then I try and translate it on a technical term. I don't expect Denis to know the emotional difference between T2 and 2 1/3, like, or a 50mm and a 55. He does, because he's very clever, but I don't expect the director to know that stuff, you know. But I look deeply into their reaction when they see or feel something, and it comes down to that feeling. I try and burrow into the psyche. I try and hear what the director is feeling through their words, through their lack of words, through their, you know. One thing I love about Denis, being a French Canadian, is very similar to Australians in some regards. There's no being politically correct. You know, again, I'm generalizing, but a lot of Americans will go, yeah, I really love that. You think we could try a longer lens? And you go, okay, I know what you're saying. You're saying you hate it and you want us to try something else. That's cool. Whereas Denis goes, I hate it. I'm going to try a longer lens. I'm like, perfect. But at the same time, he wouldn't like. He'd also say, "I deeply love it." That's my bad Denis impression.
Yeah,
But you know, he completely is honest with everything he says. You don't have to kind of go, what would he mean by that? Was he trying to be polite? And like, I love it because he just gets down to business. Like, and Australians tend to do that as well. There's no kind of like passive aggression, or there's no kind of. It's like it's love.
That's why there's parts of me, and as much as I love being an American, there's parts of me that feels very, very un-American in that way. You know, and you and I have talked about it, living in Europe or living, you know what I mean? I just respond. It's economically better. It's creatively better. It's just when you deal with, again, a lack of pretense and a lack of ego and just straightforward, honest, that there by somebody saying, I don't like that, I find that in your circumventing example is people feel like it's going to make them look bad. It's going to make them look, you know what I'm saying? Or there's some weird manipulative way to get what they want, but they can't just state that because then it will come back to them. And I saw that between you and Denis, and that's what I have with Denis. And I think the whole movie was kind of wrought with that and that's why I think it felt very familial. And I think that's why you get that when you watch the movie. It doesn't feel like anybody pops per se. It feels like everybody is there supporting each other.
I mean, going back to also what you said about me having done some big films, like I can't disagree with that because, of course, relatively speaking, they're bigger than other films, right? But at their core, everything that I feel like I do, I feel like has a very, very similar core. You know, like the Atreides family is not dissimilar to a family that I've shot on a smaller Australian film. Or like, okay, yeah, all right, they're royalty and they travel across the universe and they get attacked by anyway. So yes, okay, you could argue that I'm an idiot by saying that, but ultimately the core of it is identical, and it shouldn't be any different to that. And if that's where I think the success of this film occurs in my mind, is that we're invested in these people, and they're the films I want to make. Now, I love blowing stuff up. I love seeing massive fireballs behind you as you're running to get away from things, and like that's all fun. It's fun watching you get surprised by a fire that goes off in a different place than you expect. But the joy of it is actually kind of seeing those characters and the character. You know, that scene of you and Paul in the fight training. That's a fantastic scene. I mean, that's a powerful, fantastic scene. And I remember, you know, watching that take place and watching that was the first scene that I'd shot with you, I think. So I hadn't seen anything from you in person. Obviously, I'd seen your work, and I was like, wow, you know, in the mood. Like I was really
what an
really
actor.
impressed.
What an actor.
What an actor.
You know, the problem with that scene was there was a lot of training for the fight scene, a ton of training, and the dialogue. Denis and I rewrote about 2 days before, so the dialogue was very elusive to me as we were doing it, and I didn't feel like we were nailing it. I hate not being on top of my shit. But you know what you just said is very much like, and I've even said it about you. I was, you know, in taking photographs. You taking photographs on set, along with having the massive responsibility of you know, $150+ million thing, and I'm kind of bullshitting as I say it. It's just, it feels like it's something to say. Like, how did you deal with the pressure of having to do such a big film and then allow yourself to take photographs in between? Which is a statement I don't agree with and I don't believe, because I believe the same as you believe, whether I'm doing Deadpool 2 or Avengers or W or No Country or Flirting with Disaster, you know, a vast difference in budget. They all feel the same to me.
Yeah.
Yes, there's fireballs in one, and maybe there's not in another. Maybe there's bubble bath in another. But the truth of the matter is you lend yourself emotionally to each one, and just because one is a bigger budget, and yes, there's more responsibility, I think emotionally you and I are very similar in that way, that we approach it exactly the same, which is why I think you differ from a lot of cinematographers that I see. I truly believe that. And even saying before that this is a peak and all that, no, I don't believe that either. You know, we have our peaks. No Country was a peak or an opportunity for me. You know, I know what it's like to do really shitty movies, and I know what it's like to do really, really good movies. And I prefer doing good movies and working with good people, mostly because there's a lack of pretense and there's a real deep, never-ending interest in their skill set. What fascinates me about you is being as good as you are and being kind of tapped in emotionally as you are to the process, that there's not a part of you, at least in my experience, that gets in there and wants to kind of willfully direct a scene, you know, and you're not passive aggressive in that way, you know, but that you use your skill set in cinematography to exploit the intention of what the director and the actor has. And I've seen that. I've seen scenes that would have been good way better because of what you've done in order to enhance what the intention is.
Thank you. Well, you know, I appreciate you saying so, because it's a huge honor to be given the responsibility to capture that, you know, and particularly on this film. Like I've said it a few times in Q&As, but I genuinely mean it. This is Denis' dream film, you know, like basically he's handing me cinematographically, you know, his baby. And, you know, I could, yeah, and you're right, there is a lot of pressure, and I put a lot of pressure on myself, to be honest. Like on this particular film, I was very diligent about, you know, eating well, exercising, staying good in the mind, staying sharp, staying as slept as I could, you know, not doing the things that people do when they're away, like socializing or whatever. Like I was a little bit like a monk, you know, short of self-flagellation in the evening. I would, you know, I'd be very, very still every night, and, you know.
Lungs taste the air of time, blown past fallen sand.
Fear of what? Young master, how does it feel to walk on a new world? Exciting, to say the least.
Where did you like shooting? What about Jordan did you appreciate? What did you appreciate about the practicality of Jordan and Budapest? And I know we went to Norway and Abu Dhabi also, but what were some moments that stuck out for you in Jordan and in Budapest?
Again, I've been asked this question a few times at Q&As about, like, was it tough shooting in the desert? And I said, no, it was tougher shooting not in the desert. Like, when you're in the desert, there's a spirituality there that if you're in touch, I'm not in touch with my spirituality. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm some shaman, but like I do have a huge, deep connection to that desert, you know. And, you know, I've shot out in Kununurra in Australia, in Middle Australia. I did second unit for Mandy Walker, who, by the way, is another hero and inspiration for me. She's a fantastic cinematographer. But the desert itself, like the light in the desert as the sun rises and sets, is like something wild that you know. I mean, I understand where spirituality came from thousands of years ago, standing in those deserts. So, you know, it was very inspirational. Like it became our film. And we also did a little run at the end in Abu Dhabi with just a few of us. And it was literally like, I think we took three actors. I think Timothy, Rebecca, and Sharon, I think, came. And we just had a wonderful time. It's just like this got a small little independent film. I haven't shot with that few people in the longest time, and it was such a pleasant experience to do that.
Yeah, it was a guerrilla experience.
Can I go back a second? Because you said to me, like, you turned down Sicario twice. And I was like, what? Had you seen Prisoners at that time? Prisoners wasn't out, right? You hadn't seen Prisoners?
No, I think it was out. I think it had come out.
Had you seen it? That's a masterpiece. Prisoners, I mean, Sicario's as well, but
I'm not a very smart guy. I think what I do is I challenge I mean, look, I knew Benicio, I knew he was doing it. I knew Emily, socially. I knew Deakins well at that point. And ultimately it was Deakins who sent me, who obviously is an extremely laconic person, sent me an email and said, quit being a jackass and get down here. The storyboards have your face on it, or something like that, which I thought was funny. But I don't know what, I mean, I might've been working a lot or too much, and I was looking for a way out. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, man. There's a lot of reasons, but I'm happy that I obviously did it because it was the one time, like you say about Denis, where it wasn't a lie, where we actually got together and we grew that role into something that I thought was. And then Jeffrey Donovan, we, on set, we just started improvising the first scene that we had. And Jeffrey was supposed to have 5 lines in Sicario, and he ended up being in both movies that we've done so far. It became an essential part of both of those movies. So Denis is very good at exploiting what's to be exploited in what can enhance a film, so yes, there's a lot of prep, yes, there's intention and all that kind of stuff, but if something pops up that he sees as, at least from his perception, gold, he's not only going to use it, but he's going to cultivate it in some way, and that's very rare for a director.
I mean, it seems like he makes something great, extraordinary. Like, I didn't read the Prisoner script or Sicario, but obviously the story is interesting for both of those. And Arrival, and everything he's done actually. But they're all incredibly interesting stories. But Sicario could have been pedestrian, as could Prisoners, as could Arrival. They all could have been very pedestrian. And you watch those films, and they have some of the most incredible scenes in film history. We at Camera Image, there was a little 5 or 6 minute cut of Denis' work before he was presented with this Outstanding Director Award. And I turned to him and I said, dude, this is amazing. I mean, not that I ever doubted it, but it was incredible to me that it was like beautiful shots in Incendies, Prisoners. I mean, I don't know, I use this as an example about his work. The end of Prisoners, that the way that Prisoners ends is a work of a genius director, because every single person who watches that movie gets to have their own reality of what happens to Hugh Jackman when he gets out, Hugh Jackman's character, when he gets out of that hole. Some people want to see him reunited with the daughter, live happily ever after. Some people want to see him reunited with the daughter and go to jail for beating the Jesus out of Paul Dano's character. But so both of those work. So I was happy and you were happy, and we might have different outcomes for that character. But that's one decision that he's made out of thousands of decisions that are great, that make a great script or a great story extraordinary. And yeah, so I'm really pleased that you said yes to that, because it means that you've now got a relationship with him as a person, and you're hopefully doing part 2.
Yeah, well, I hope you're doing part 2.
Have you sent Denis a gift basket yet? Because you never know.
No, I don't do that. You never know. I might be written out. What we do is we send each other a lot of videos on we just video ourselves doing stupid shit, and he tells me often, because this comes from Sicario, because he would knock on my door in Sicario, and I know whether it was a scene that we really hadn't figured out yet, and that he and I would start to tweak dialogue wise. It was either that or Benny, who just didn't want to memorize anything, and not say his own dialogue, it would always come to me. And what he would say to Denis is, give it to Josh. He likes to talk. And I go, I'm a different character. It was written for your character. And I'd hear that knock on the door and I would say, go away. Cause I knew it stemmed from a conversation that he and Benicio had. And now we were going to put it together. So what Denis keeps writing me or saying in his videos is that he's writing incredible expositional dialogue for me in Dune 2. And he can't wait for me to have to say it. Like I have no choice. When is it in prep and on set? And I know what you said before, where it's like you may see a flare, or you may realize that you need to be closer, but whatever that is. But how much prep is there and choices are there put into deciding a look, a general look? It's like, you're going to use, these three lenses the majority of the time.
It varies depending on the complexity, because the more time you have, the more opportunity you have to play. So on this,
and
we
fail.
had a bit of time. I mean, yeah, exactly. We have a chance to kind of shoot something that doesn't work, and in fact, that's actually often more important, because you're better off failing in prep than you are on the shoot. So it's nice to sort of run through the gauntlet. I mean, Denis and I tested film to shoot this on film, and Denis and I both put money on the fact. In fact, we shot a test to show the studio how good it's going to look on film, and we showed them, and then realized that actually it wasn't the format that we wanted to shoot. So we sort of shot ourselves a bit in the foot by doing that. But we were being honest for what the film needs. The film needed to be shot the way it was shot digitally, and then transferred back to film, and then rescanned and then graded, which was a technique that has been used a little bit in the past, but not a lot. And this, I think, is going to show the world that there is this third process that's not just digital or just film. You can do a hybrid version of it where you can, do a DI, spit it out to film. You can print the film, you can push the film, you can burn the film, you can bleach the film. Like, you can go back and do all those beautiful things that we all used to do back in the day. But then you can get a look that's unique and not necessarily repeatable with a filter. There are people, and I've already heard from them, and people have written to me about, that everything that happens on film is repeatable digitally, and I get it. I understand scientifically that might be the case, but I don't know. Like sometimes, why do things happen? Why does light bounce off here? Why do you run into someone 3 times in the same day? Like why? No one knows. There are some things that just happen, and you can't really put a finger on it. So we tried to find a lot of those happy accidents during the prep, and we did. We found a lot of them, and we found an opportunity to kind of connect on a from storyboards and references, and we having that prep time allowed us to kind of create the way that the Fremen attack. The Fremen attack from under the soil, under the sand.
Right.
I had my assistant Nick spend a day finding all these references of like octopi, I guess, that bury under the water. When an unsuspecting dumbass fish swims past, it attacks in this like sandy flurry. I've seen like shark attacks of the way sharks all attack, and you can't really see what's going on because they're all shielded. So, all that prep time allowed things like that to come to the fore. And if we had very little prep time, then that wouldn't have happened.
That was instigated by you telling Nick, hey, you know what, I just had this idea about octopus or octopi, and go, what are things that are covert, that attack from their hovels? And
yeah, I mean, it's funny because I asked Denis a couple of weeks ago what his recollections were, exactly what the script said, and we looked at the script, and I think the script had that they bounce up, or I can't recall what it says actually, but we had to find a way for the Fremen to attack the Sardaukar. And you've got these Sardaukar in this massive cavern, like an exhibition hall, let's say. I mean, where are the Fremen going to hide? They're going to hide behind a rock and jump out and attack. Like, it could have been goofy. It could have been really goofy. So we're trying to find like the most interesting way that you can create a fight scene without necessarily seeing the fight. Because, you know, like we'd seen a lot of fights up to that point. We'd seen a lot of fights and they're all fun, but sometimes, as per the Jaws rule, sometimes the less you see, the more terrifying it is. So absolutely. I just love the idea that this smoke, this sand goes bonkers, and you just can hear and feel the fight going on underneath it.
The more you talk about this stuff, the more I realize, like I'll take me out of the equation, but actors who I've appreciated in the past, and you talk, you know, about it, a lot of interviews that actors do, not cinematographers per se, but actors will talk about, you know, how they prepped their characters. It's always an interesting piece because it's something very personal. They're using themselves as their instrument and all that kind of stuff. But what you don't hear is what you're doing right now, which is talking exactly like these wonderful actors that I've appreciated. And you read their biographies, and what did they do what did Daniel Day do to get into that? What did Sean Penn do to get into that?
But that's an interesting thing that I've never considered, because if you put me on a set with one of my heroes, Roger or Mandy or, you know, Gordon Willis, I don't think I could do anything. Actually, I don't think I think I'd be pretty useless, actually. Like if you're standing on set with one of your heroes and you're acting opposite one of your heroes, or even somebody that you respect a lot, a peer who you respect really well, I mean, what's the thought process there? Are you constantly comparing yourself to them? Are you trying to give them the ability to perform their best? Break that down for me, because I don't quite understand that.
It depends. It depends on the movie, and it depends on the person. You know, when I did American Gangster with Denzel Washington, Denzel was it to me. When I saw Glory, when I saw you know, Cry Freedom, when I saw some of these movies that he's done, most of the movies that he's done, but especially as a young actor, he was a massive, massive inspiration for me. And then I'm sitting there, somehow cast, No Country hadn't come out, and it was right after No Country. And I'm sitting there, and Brian Grazer's running around for 2 weeks because I had done my scenes with Russell before I did a scene with Denzel, and Brian's walking around with his hair going, "You should see Josh and Russell. It's amazing. Josh and Russell, it's amazing." and I know that got to Denzel. So by the time I was going to do our scene with Denzel, our first scene that we did together, there was a lot of attitude, and I'll say this openly, with Denzel, you know, and I was working with one of my heroes, and there was a lot of strife and tension between us immediately. And I think part of it was because of that, and part of it was some other things. And he and I'll say that he and I turned out to be great friends. But there was definitely, so say it was, and I at the same time, I'm sitting there going, is he doing the character? Is he doing him? Is this me? Is this personal? Is this what he does? Is this what great actors do? And I had no idea. So I'm sitting there shitting my pants the whole time, and I'm supposed to be the uber confident one. And I hold up a card that says, pay this, you know, send $10,000 a month to this place. And literally all my focus is going, so I don't do this because it's going to ruin the scene. That is one example. And I think it depends where you are in your career. It depends on how comfortable you are in the character. There's characters that I've created that I just did it with brothers, that it's the worst version of me. So every time I come on set, I just would, you know, after I go home and complete a day, I just want to slap myself, because it's revealing the worst parts of myself. But, you know, working with the greats, having been blessed to be able to work with amazing actors, like I would say most all my favorite actors, at least contemporarily.
Some of the best ever. Yep.
Has been a great blessing, and has been a building of my confidence, because I come from a very fearful, insecure place. I think initially it's like climbing Everest. You know, you don't climb Everest right away. You climb one peak and then another peak, and you work yourself up and work yourself up. And I think that's what's happened. And now, like you, to bring it back to you, you know, I'm in a place in my career where I still have fear, but it's a different fear. It's more, I wonder if I can pull this off, as opposed to, I wonder if I can hold my own with this other actor. And you taught me along the way have more compassion and to be more interested with people who are not contemporaries, but newbies, new into this business, because they have a perspective that we don't necessarily have, that we can learn a lot from. And you've been you've been formative in lifting up younger cinematographers.
I think you get back what you give out, and you know, where I can help people, I will, and I do. Obviously, I have to focus on what I'm doing, because otherwise, you know, I can't be. I have to be focused doing my job first and foremost. But I believe there's lots of opportunities out there to help between those times, and it's not just cinematographers. It's also filmmakers in general. I just judged the music video category in Camerimage, and just there were some incredible works in that. But we awarded this incredible director DP duo, Polish, for this amazing music video they did, and I don't know. It gave me great pleasure to hand them an award, more than actually getting an award myself. I think, to be frank, handing them an award gave me more pleasure.
And I think that's why you and I have become friends. I think it's why you and I stay friends, and it's why we can prod each other, because there's an incredible trust between both of us, and that we both, I think, go for that and are sensitive to that communal experience.
You know, and I think that's not necessarily what happens entirely in the film business. There is a bit of singularity and a bit of kind of dog eat dog, particularly in Hollywood. But you know, this is where I think this particular film that we've made, with the people that we've made it with, Denis and Tanya particularly, Tanya being a producer on the film, Denis being the director. I mean, it starts from there. It's the goodwill, the good karma, the good, you know, all that starts from that point. And you know, the people that they've brought on are like-minded and will grow from that, and they'll give. They're the same. They're exactly the same. And I'm convinced that it's possible, because I've seen it, and I've seen the possibility to have a fantastic film experience without all of the negativity, the toxicity, all the stuff that happens in commercial filmmaking. Or it's a joy. It was a joy, and it will be a joy. So I'm dearly hope that you do send your gift basket to Denis, because I do want to see you there.
Yeah, I want to see you there too.